All right, how's it going, everyone? My name is Frank, and in my lightning talk today, in 5 minutes, I will help you become an auto layout wizard by teaching you how to get your custom views to size themselves. Let's get to it. So, this is you, or this is you. You're obviously not a wizard yet, you are but an artist. And you create a custom UI view, which looks something like this, right? It's beautiful. And of course, it extends UI view. And then you go ahead and try and use it, right? So you put it in like interface builder or programmatically, and it ends up looking like that. And you're like, oh, damn. And I know what your first impulse is. Your first impulse is to go to Stack Overflow or to go to Reddit and be like, yo, what the hell's going on? But you don't do that. You actually go online and check the documentation, and you see this here. Intrinsic content size. Wow, what is this? So the documentation says the natural size for the receiving view, considering only properties of the view itself. What is natural in the land of like processors and silicon? We can debate that tonight around a beer. But alas, what is intrinsic content size? Essentially, it is a way for the system to let your views size themselves based on their content. Essentially, it's like if you have auto layout on the left and your view on the right, it's like auto layout telling your view, you do you. So how do you use it? It's actually pretty simple. All you have to do is override a single property. Override intrinsic content size, whoop, return the size that you want, and you're done. Hey, round of applause. No, I'm kidding. Actually, someone in the audience actually raises their hand and says, how do you figure out which size to return? And, well, first of all, thank you, hypothetical audience member. That's a good question. And it turns out all UIKit views return some sort of intrinsic content size already. So this is something that we can make use of. For example, a button returns a height and a width, right? And a label returns a height and a width. Even multi-line labels return heights and widths. But pro tip, only if you set max preferred layout width first. Just throw that out there. A UI image view actually sets a height and a width based on the UI image that's backing it. And even something like a UI slider actually only returns a height, but doesn't return a width because while it does have something that can, it does have a height, no matter what content you give it, it can't really represent a width. It doesn't have an intrinsic width. So instead it returns a constant called no intrinsic metric. But cool, so now you're armed with all this, right? And now you have your beautiful UI view again, and you're like, okay, so how do I calculate the intrinsic content size of something that I myself create? Well, you can go ahead and take the intrinsic content size of its subviews. So here, for example, we get the size of our image view, we get the size of our label, we get the size of, well, you have the spacing in between each, right? And for the width, you can take, the width of your image view, you can take the width of your label at the bottom and figure out what's the maximum between the two and use that. And then you end up with something pretty elegant. Something simple like this where, you get the intrinsic content size of each of your subviews and you have your spacing, and now you do CG, and then you return a new CG size. The width is the maximum between the two, and the height is the sum of all those heights. And just like that, now you're a wizard who can make UI views that size themselves. And this is super useful, especially in things like UI stack view actually uses this to automatically size views. So if you've ever created a custom UI view, put it in a UI stack view, and then it goes like, it's the one that gets stretched. That's why. And that's the end. Was that 5 minutes? For real this time. And hey, round of applause. My name is Frank. I have a website called ioscoachfrank.com. Check it out. The more people subscribe to my mailing list, the more motivated I'll be to write more than one article per year. And that's all I got for you today. Oh, and if you want to talk about this stuff over a beer, there's actually some really, really cool, interesting ways that UIKit uses this in terms of like creating constraints for content hugging and content compression. It's actually really, really elegant what happens under the scenes. So voila. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes.
Pardon me. Wait, can you repeat that? Can you repeat the question? Okay, so that's a good question. So about like content hugging and content compression resistance, right? Like, is that available on every view? Actually, it is, but it doesn't work unless you have an intrinsic content size. So if you don't have an intrinsic content size, content hugging and content compression actually don't work the way you'd expect them to, which makes this important. Shoot. Yeah. Oh man, that's a good question. I think like it's a constant. I think it's 0, -1. I'm not, yeah. Yeah, it's weird. Like it doesn't make sense. So you kind of have to be, I think, defensive and kind of guard against it. Voila.